information with Yavapai County residents. We ask that you keep your videos and mics turned off during the presentation. We do welcome and encourage questions. Please post your questions in the chat box. And then if you have questions after this evening that didn't get answered or more that come up, you can email them to one of our Master Gardener help desks. The contact info for that will be found in the chat box. I will post it there as soon as I'm done introducing our wonderful presenter. Now, if you're disconnected during the presentation or have other technical issues, please email the Master Gardener help desk right away. I'm going to post that link in the chat box. And because if you get disconnected, you won't be able to see it. You may want to write it down and just have it on your desk or somewhere close. And we are monitoring that and we'll be back in touch with you right away. Now, as always, this is going to be recorded and you probably just saw the pop-up box. Tonight's presentation is being hosted, again, I said, by the Yavapai County Master Gardeners. We are a part of the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. Every county in Arizona has a cooperative extension office, and you may be familiar with some of our other programs, such as 4-H, food safety, nutrition education, STEM, commercial horticulture, and small acreage support. Master Gardeners provide science-based horticulture information. Now, tonight's presentation is on grafting. We're very excited to have our speaker with us. Her name is Kathleen Corum, and Kathleen started her higher education in the School of Agriculture, earning an MS in animal breeding and genetics. She continued on in engineering, earning a master's in industrial engineering, and became a systems engineer. Now, she's also bred, raised, trained, and competed with horses for 40 years, and similarly 10 years with dogs. And they work specifically in scent detection, which I find fascinating. She completed her Master Gardener certification in 2013. She was actually my table mate. And she went on to get a permaculture certification in 2016. Since then, she's been studying all sorts of edible plants. And currently, she volunteers at the Master Gardener help desk in our Prescott office. So welcome, Kathleen. It's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Trish. So we're talking about grafting today. And if you think it's graft and corruption, you're in the wrong place. But we're talking about grafting fruits and plants. And it's the joining of two related plants. Unrelated plants can't be grafted together, no matter what people seem to think. And by doing so, you get some of the advantages of the parent plant or the rootstock and some of the advantages of the scionwood. And it's taken to be a method for cloning the scionwood. In other words, a lot of the references I make are going to be to apples, because apples are such a commercially important crop that more work has been done on the development of varieties and on the development of rootstocks for apples than for other types of plants or fruit trees. And in fact, there's more genetic diversity among apples, which means that if you take an apple seedling, you're as likely to get a spitter as you are to get a delicious fruit. Whereas with, say, for example, peaches, there's less genetic diversity. And so a peach seedling often will produce a peach tree that produces acceptable fruit. But anyway, it's a method for cloning the scion, or the parent, the scion wood parent, which produces an exact replica. And on apples, this has been very important. But it requires the joining or healing together of the cambium layers of the scion wood and the rootstock or the parent. And the compatibility has to be considered. Not every combination works. So, and for the general rule, the stone fruits, most of them, there's a good chance they will be compatible with other stone fruit rootstocks, but that's not so true. Whereas with palm fruits like apples and pears, and they're not so compatible with the stone fruit. So anyway, so the cloning, the grafting is a cloning procedure, cloning propagation method. Now, if you do root, if you root some cuttings off of something, that's another cloning propagation methodology, but not all types of plants will root easily and readily. Many of the, well, apples is a good example. So some of the species that are typically grafted are the ones that are so difficult to root. It has the advantage also of being able to multiply the parent or the scionwood donor extensively, more so than some other methodologies like the rooting, because the rooting is so difficult. But anyway, it extends the use of that scion material. The rootstock, on the other hand, may impair some disease resistance or cold hardiness. It shortens the time to fruit, can shorten the time to fruiting considerably, and it can dwarf the mature size of the tree. Grafting also optimizes your opportunity for cross-pollination and the extent of pollination on the tree, because you can have more than one variety, so you can get cross-pollination within your own one tree. And a lot of times without a pollination partner, you can't get a good fruit crop. It also can extend the harvest time on one tree, because if you can have a lot of different varieties, then you can have sequential harvest. And like sequential ripening of various varieties all on one tree. So those are some of the advantages of grafting onto fruit trees. Now, the disadvantages are that cloning, which is what grafting is, it cannot develop new varieties. So, and it requires specialized skills to do it, and it can result in a plant with a shorter life. The graft itself can get killed, and the plant, the rootstock may have maybe a shorter lived rootstock, and it can spread viral diseases. Any disease that the scionwood has can go back to the root stock plant. Now, with regard to cloning not developing new varieties, I also want to point out that it does not help in the preservation of historic varieties, because if, for example, we had been able to graft Red Delicious onto every apple tree in the United States at the time when the Red Delicious was so very popular, you can see just how much we would have missed out on. I don't think Red Delicious is a popular tree these days at all, but that is a disadvantage of losing genetic diversity, which cloning contributes to that. So there are several different types of grafting, and cleft grafting is the most common. It's the one that generally gets taught at the grafting workshops. It's the simplest thing. and the easiest thing, and probably has the highest success rate. The fact is, I don't know anybody who does any other kind of grafting successfully. That doesn't mean I know everybody. So there could be people that, I mean, here in our locally, I do know that Rafael, who taught the grafting workshop in Skull Valley a couple of years ago, said that she's never done any other kind of grafting other than cleft grafting. So that goes to show you that it is really the predominant method. Another one is whip and tongue graft, which is can have a very strong and very secure result, and can be pretty impressive looking. It requires more skill. Now I have a friend, a carpenter, a joiner friend, who I mean, he would graft absolutely anything, because evidently he's had enough success so that he is encouraged to continue to do that. And he swears by that because he's so very, very skilled. He can do it very, very well. Well, he persuaded me to try it. So I tried it and I cut myself badly twice, and now he can have it from here on out. I'm done. So then the next one would be the saddle graft, which is essentially an upside down cleft. You do the same cuts, but you do what would normally be the cut on the scionwood becomes the cut on the rootstock, and vice versa. And so it's essentially an upside down cleft graft. I don't know why it hasn't taken on as much as the cleft graft has, but it is less well known. Another one would be bud grafting, and that's accomplished during the summer. Most of the grafting that we do is done during the winter, but it's done in the summer when the bark is slipping. It's a different technique. I'll show a picture of it. And then there's the bark or rind graft, and that's really useful for mismatched diameters between the rootstock and the scionwood. As for an example, grafting, putting new scionwood onto really large old mature trees, and that works. And then bridge grafting, which is a specialty grafting, which is done frequently on historic orchards to try to repair severe trunk damage and preserve these old orchards. So the factors for a successful graft are compatibility. As I said, not all combinations will work. As an example, citrus won't go on to any of the other. Citrus won't go on to stone fruit or palm fruit, vice versa. Anyway, it has to be compatible. And then the next thing is cambium alignment and pressure. And this is the part where some skill is required and very careful attention to detail, because the vascular cambium tissues of the scion have to be tightly pressed to get together with the rootstock cambium, and they have they have to be oriented in the direction of the normal growth. It's possible to graft scion upside down, and that has very poor chances of success. I guess it has happened that they've taken, but they probably are very short-lived. And then getting them aligned properly and applying pressure, it allows the nutrients and water to transfer from the rootstock to the scion, and that's what the grafting accomplishes. The timing, it varies with species. And now I'm told that peaches need to be grafted later in the year when the weather is warmer. Grafting is fairly typically done in the very early spring or late winter. The most common grafting is done on pears and apples because they have the highest rates of success. And I do think that the fact that it's done in late spring or a late winter or early spring may have as much to do with this schedule of activities for the orcharders as it does with what is best or most highly successful with the grafting. But it's important to have the buds on the scion dormant when the grafting is performed, so that well, and really to have the rootstock break dormancy at about that time, so that the rootstock will provide the sap and so on to accomplish provide the callus tissue and heal the graft. So the magic combination would be a fully dormant scion wood and a rootstock that is pushing sap so that the scion never dries out. That's the trick. And part of that is accomplished by sealing the cut surfaces really well. And even, in fact, some people, when they cut their scions to begin with, they wrap the entire scion with parafilm. So parafilm is the product that I use, and it's pretty popular. There are other products that people use, but anyway. But if the scion breaks buds, that accelerates the drying out of the scion, and that's where the failure happens. So anyway, so, and then for protection, the wrapping needs to be done so that the evaporation doesn't dry the scion wood out or the cut surfaces. The cut surfaces have to fill in with this the callus tissue in order to accomplish the healing of the graft. Now, various methods of protection are done now. Commonly, people will use a grafting rubber, and they wrap that around the graft, and that's intended to secure it. I personally use only the parafilm, and I wrap it really tightly, and I stretch it as I wrap it. The reason I don't like the rubbers is because you can't see through them, so you don't know whether you've maintained the position of the scion as you're doing the wrapping. But people use electrician's tape and all kinds of different things to do the grafting. But anyway, so here's a picture of cleft grafting, and this is the scion. Now, when I do it, I would make this slanted cut come up as high as I could, and on the other side, and I would make this cut into this rootstock as deep as I could, and I would put it down in there so that you get a maximum amount of, this is the cambium run, the surface of the cambium runs right along this cut edge here. Whoops. Yeah. It runs right along this edge of the cuts thing, and their cambium is penetrated by this cut. It's on both sides of this slit. So the farther you force it down here, the more cambium contact you get. And also the more wood from the scion is being supported by the wood of the rootstock. So I try to make those as long as I can. And then there you're showing wrapping it with the material, whatever it is, parafilm or the grafting rubber or grafting rubber. Some people will paint these things with the grafting wax. That's another thing, Doc Farwell's grafting wax or something. But as I said, the grafting rubber, or I just use the parafilm, and then the grafting wax. I do know people who will wrap the entire scion with parafilm at the time they cut it to prevent it from drying out between when it's cut and when the grafting is accomplished. So there's cleft grafting in a nutshell. Now here's another, this is a video that shows it being done. The focus on this isn't perfect, but it is not bad. And this shows, this is a grafting knife. They're sharp on one, are beveled on one side and flat on the other, and they're very sharp. And they, here he's cutting into the rootstock. Here he's preparing the scion wood by cutting the point, making it pointy. Here's the rootstock down here. And then over here, he's placing the scion wood in between these two sides of the rootstock. And I think he did wrap this whole thing with parafilm. And then here, finally, he's wrapping the end result with the paraffin and stretching it, you see, which is what I do to get a tight thing. If you stretch it the right amount, it has some stretch left, and it will hold tight, and it applies pressure. So here's whip and tongue grafting. And this is an illustration. There is a slanted cut on one side, and then another cut put in here. Same is done on the rootstock, and then this tongue here is put down into the rootstock. My experience with it was that it took a lot of force to make these cuts. And the techniques that I use for doing the cleft grafting, I couldn't use, and I cut myself really badly twice and just decided no more of that for me. But anyway, so that's whip and tongue grafting. And as you can see, you have quite a bit of surface area, and you have wood down between, the wood of the scion wood is down in between the wood of the rootstock. Plus you've got a support on this structure on that side. So it's very secure. And here's a photograph of the actual graft that somebody did. That's the cut. So you have this cambium contact goes all the way along here like this. So you see, that's how much surface is being provided for the healing of the callus material and the healing of the graft. So anyway, so that's whip and tongue grafting. And then here's bud grafting. This is an excellent video here. And this is the petiole. There's an axial bud, I think you call it, between the twig and the petiole. You slice that off, and this bud here is what will end up being the graft when it breaks bud. And this is applied to this place that's prepared on the host plant, the rootstock. It's done when in the summer when the bark is slipping. It utilizes budwood, which is what this is. This is a bud. And in fact, I'm told that these bud grafting, these buds may not even break bud the year that their grafting is accomplished. It's done during the summer, and the bud may not break until the next spring, which may make sense because on a tree, at the buds at every leaf junction don't all just automatically break all the time. Anyway, it's commonly done in rose bushes and in citrus propagation. Now here's the bark or rind graft. And as I said, the cleft grafting is the only one I know that people are doing here, but I gave this YouTube information and described the process being done to Gary Beverly, and he did it this winter. So we may have somebody who will have had a success with it. I will say that as hot and dry as this year has been, I would think this wouldn't be a fair test of your grafting skills if you don't have success this year. But anyway, this is from Dave Wilson Nursery. They produce a huge percentage of our commercially available fruit trees. And on this website, they took an orchard that had a fruit crop that they were having trouble marketing. It wasn't popular for whatever reason. And they converted the entire orchard, a big mature fruiting orchard. They converted it to a different variety. And this is how they did it. And they show here in this video, they cut all these limbs off and left one limb, what they call a nurse branch, on each tree to keep the sap flowing and keep the tree feeling happy and alive. And then they do these bark or rind grafts. And this has just one sloping cut. That on that grafting knife I showed you, I'll flip back and show it to you again. This knife here is a grafting knife. This little bump right here, it's used to lift the bark. Right here. They use that bump to lift the graft, and then they've prepared this with a slit. They push this down underneath the bark and against the cambium. So the cambium here of this scion wood is up against the cambium of the nurse branch. Then they go and they seal the entire top of this. And they may seal I don't know what they did with the scion wood, but they seal the entire top of this with either a grafting wax or an asphalt type of an emulsion, to my amazement. But anyway, and then they watch these, and usually at least one or two of these will take, and they'll start growing. And then at some point during the year, they decide which one of the ones they like, and they prune out the others. They seal it all with the material, and they cover the top of it with a paper bag with holes in it. And anyway, they converted the orchard that way. And now they have a marketable variety that they know is popular, that they know will sell well. Now this is the second video here. This fellow is doing a demo. This is never done on a tree that's not in the ground. This is one of the top working methods used to put new varieties on established trees. And he's demonstrating it. So anyway, that's bark or rind grafting. And here's the bredge graft. And like I said, this has been done on historic orchards. For any really valuable tree with somebody who has the skills to do it, they can do this. And in this particular case, I wouldn't be surprised if this wasn't actually rootstock that they put in here. But in any case, that's bridge grafting. There was a like sun scald or wildlife chewing on it, or somebody's weed whacker or whatever has damaged it, and they're repairing it. This is a way to repair historic trees. This is just an example of something interesting being done. Now, this is called an approach graft. Now, when we're doing pruning, we're told to try to remove anything that looks like it might end up with incorporated bark, which is what you would have if there were two limbs that were up against each other. But they don't have incorporated bark because they removed it, and they put the bare wood and the cambium material against each other, and it adheres, it grows through. So that's the approach graft. So the rootstock governs the precocity, how long until it bears fruit. It governs the mature size, and it also governs the mature size of the root system. It's actually the size of the root system that determines the mature size of the tree. But with these more dwarfing types of rootstocks, if you choose one of those, this root system, they with apples, it's so much, they're so economically important that a lot of research and effort and development has been done on rootstocks and as well as the fruiting varieties. And they pass judgment on the root system of each of these different rootstocks they've developed, and they'll tell you how long you need to stake them. And there are dwarfing varieties of rootstocks, which I have in my backyard, which will require staking for the entire life of the tree, because the root system, it dwarfs the tree by being smaller and less secure. So anyway, the rootstock also impairs some disease resistance, and especially to root diseases. The cyan word governs the chill hour requirement, which tends to tell you when the thing is going to break the buds and start to leaf out, and when it will bloom to some extent, mostly when it will break dormancy. And then it also governs how the days to harvest after bloom. I will point out that the bloom time doesn't tell you when the harvest will come. It's counterintuitive, but just because a tree blooms first doesn't mean it will produce the first fruit. The fruit on some varieties is quicker to mature than on others. It determines the type and quality of the fruit is determined by the cyanwood, and it also impairs some other disease resistance properties. So the grafting terms, apart from the names of the types of grafts, are top working, which is the grafts done on established trees; bench grafting, which is grafts on the rootstock before it's planted, when it's out of the ground; and then double working is when there's an inner stem, and that's being done deliberately in some cases. However, anytime you have a rootstock and then one graft and then another graft, that's an inner stem, and I have that on most of my trees. So why top work graft? This is an example of top working. I think this is a plum. What's amazing about this, I mean, these are all, every different color is a different variety of plum. But what's amazing to me about this is that they all bloomed at the same time. It's not amazing to me that he got all these different colors, but it's amazing to me that they all bloomed at the same time. And that may be characteristic of plums. But if my apple trees, you know, you'd have one limb bloom one time, and then those blossoms fall off, and then this one will start blooming, that sort of thing. That's more to be what I would expect. But anyway, if you top work, you can get a variety of fruits. You can have an extended harvest season. You can have weather considerations, meaning one year that's wonderful for one variety performed awesomely. The next year, it might not be the one that performs awesomely because the weather is different every year. So I don't think that you can pick anything that is perfect all the time for everything. So if you have a variety, you have a better chance. And then if you have a lot of different varieties, if you get a more uniform crop, because one will produce better one year, another one will produce better another year. And when you average it all out, you get a more uniform production off of that tree. So anyway, you can also convert the undesirable types. We talked about that with the Dave Wilson nursery, and it preserves genetic diversity. As I said, thank heaven we don't have nothing but red delicious these days. So now I wanted to show this chart. It's up on the Dave Wilson website. Here's apple. Now this isn't showing the whole chart. I wish that I had this prepared for my own orchard. The problem is that he doesn't give you the software to accomplish this. They just show you the graphic. And I tried doing it on Excel, and it's pretty tedious and tough. But anyway, here's the apple. So if you had all of these varieties grafted onto one tree, you would be getting fresh apples off the tree starting July 15th, and it goes on the other slide, but and continuing past October. And that's true with these other types of fruit as well. So that has a lot of value. You can imagine that this red Gravenstein, when you're eating it in March, has been stored a long time. You know, if you don't have any of these other varieties, you just, it has an advantage too. Now here's a better picture of it. I think this is cut off too. But anyway, here's the apples. And they started in 10th of June, ran all the way out to, he's showing it middle of November. Now this is done in Hickman, California. So you would get a different bloom time and a different harvest time in different climates than this. So you would really have to do it for your own locale in order to get it accurately. But you get my point. You really, you know, if you get for a home grower to get a little of this and a little of that all along, it's just far superior in my opinion. Plus, you know, you get a lot more variety, and you can get some cider apples and some dessert apples and some cooking apples and some applesauce apples or whatever. Same goes for, you know, other kinds of fruits too. Okay, so the variability consideration. Now I talked about this a little bit, but for apple trees, there are 7 blooming groups, I think it is. And when you're going to plan your pollination, the pollination partners are the ones that are blooming at the same time, obviously. Doesn't work for one pollen from one thing to be in June and the other one to be in August or whatever. The blooms have to be at the same time to do cross-pollination. And I do believe that sometimes some stages the fruit is less easily damaged than the blossoms are. The blossoms tend to be very tender, but I think that you can get a late frost that doesn't necessarily destroy the fruit of the early bloomers. So there's that. And of course it does vary from year to year. So and then there are various other site influences and so on. So here's the bench grafting. I just put this forth as an example. Here he's showing where he's going to do the graft, and there's the root. And when I bought my root stocks from New York, this is how they came. This is what they look like. And then, so the other thing is, if you do grafting, you have the opportunity to put some interesting things like cider apples or specialty baking apples, whatever, on your tree. I've got now some red-fleshed apples too, but you can't buy some of these trees down at the big box stores. There's a limited number of varieties that are available even by order. So you can have a lot more variety if you do some grafting. And you can get heirloom variety scionwood by trading online. Okay, so these are approximate. I can't keep track of this stuff, but I have about 78 varieties grafted onto 5 full and semi dwarf apple trees and 10 dwarf. This is my apple espalier. So what's interesting is that I have fruit on most of those varieties. But I have no fruit on my one full-size tree. So, and I think at the time that I did it, I probably didn't care. That probably wasn't uppermost in my mind. But now, I have a lot of trees, and I have a limited need for some of this stuff. I may this winter take scions from this one full-size tree and graft them onto the other trees and remove this tree. This one full-size tree is an Antonovka, and I think among apple trees, it's even larger than some of the more average size ones. So, but there's no sign of any getting any fruit from that. And it's because of the, I guess if you grew apple tree from seed, it would take more than 15 years to get fruit. And I had fruit within 3 years or something. It makes a difference where the age of the tree you cut it off, the scion wood off of, and where on the tree it came from too. There's some of this stuff that gets really specific. Before you want to make comments, you need to know the specifics. But anyway, I have 15 grafts that I added onto my apricots. Of those 15, seven of them are interspecifics. And I think probably I had never tasted any of the interspecifics that I grafted on there. And they've been a wonderful surprise. They've been unusual and they've been delicious. And I only have 2 apricot trees. So you can see there's a lot of variety on the trees. So I didn't do replacement grafting. I didn't have big limbs. I would just grafting on what I had. I mean, I had little bitty, they weren't whips, but they were small trees. And so I don't get too much of any of it. And the cherries, I put 8 varieties on 2 cherry trees. And by the way, one of them turned out to be a sour cherry. That was an accident. I didn't know it was a sour cherry. And the jujubes, I have 2 varieties on 1 jujube. I've put several others on them. I don't know why they failed. One of the jujube grafts broke a full year after the graft was placed, which is astounding. And these sorts of things are things to pay attention to, because that's one of the learnings of it, is you don't give up on these stuff. Mulberry, on the other hand, I put a lot of mulberry, I put a lot of grafts on my mulberry. They all leafed out. The jujube never leafed out for 12 months. Mulberry all leafed out. They even bloomed, had the climbs or whatever you call them. Anyway, and then they failed. So I do think, well, I know why. They leafed out and bloomed. I think what happened was that I got the scion wood from Phoenix, and I believe that it was not as dormant as it needed to be for here. And that's why these grafts all failed. And I've tried to root mulberries from cuttings, do root cuttings, and mulberries, there's so much substance to those cuttings that they are capable of leafing and putting out flower clusters and so on when they don't have any roots or anything on them. And that's what happened. So the peaches, I think that I think there's an issue with fruiting wood on the peaches. It seems like the fruiting wood tends to do its thing, and then when it's done fruiting, it dies. And I think maybe I grafted on fruiting wood. I can't verify that yet, but anyway, I've had 4 successful grafts of genetic dwarfs onto 1 full peach, and 1 is another genetic dwarf peach. So this full peach tree, I have it in a place, I actually bought this thing. It was supposed to be a nectarine. It turned out to be a peach. the next year, after I did the graft, both the peach limb and the dwarf both fruited. That's the next year, in 1 year. And it's fruited again this year. It's been fabulous. So the European pears, I have 10 varieties of European pears, which I put on a European pear. And I put 5 grafts of Europeans onto Asian pear suckers. Now these Asian pear suckers with the grafts on them, you can pry them off, and if they're low enough into the ground and have roots on them, you can make them into new trees. Now the Asian pear, I put 6 grafts of heirloom pears on it, heirloom European pears on an established Asian pear, and those scion wood came from an historic pear orchard in Oregon, and that stuff's kind of precious at this point. It came from Canaan, the fellow that owns Stoic Cider. And these may be Perry pears. They may be just real close to inedible. I don't know. But anyway. And then I have 6 grafts onto a Fuyu persimmon. And the Fuyu persimmon is like the apple persimmon. It's the one that's pretty tasty at all stages of ripeness. And I have grafted on an astringent, which is like the hachia, onto that Fuyu, and it's taken in and it's fruited. And so that's kind of fun. You get more than one kind, because the stringent ones are very different, but they're many people prefer them. When they're fully ripe, they're just really delicious. And then the Asian plum, I have 12 grafts on it. 3 of them are interspecifics, and there again, they're wonderful. And on the European plum, I put 6 European plums onto the other European plum that I have. And the European, well, this is not plums, but the European pear is good on the Asian pear, but it's not the other way around. I talked about the vigor being not, the vigor of the European rootstock is not enough to support Asian plums. Anyway, the European plums are the ones that are good for drying. So these 6 European plums that I put onto the European plum, those are the ones that are going to end up being useful for preservation, which is really important. So that's it.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Lots and lots of information, and we've got some good questions as well. Let me pull up my notes here. We had 2 people that were quite full of questions, which is awesome. Phyllis asked, and you showed us, what trees have you grafted together with success? So that one got answered. Margaret wanted to know, if you put parafilm on the scion to keep moist until you get it to graft, do you remove the film or leave it once you graft?
Where you prepare the scion, you cut the parafilm off where you prepare it.
Okay.
So there's no parafilm between the scion wood and the rootstock, but you leave it on there. You leave it on there, and then you wrap additional on over the grafting area where it's going to callus and heal.
Okay. I think I got all of this. It seems that Cheryl had some lovely javelina get into her yard, and she knew that and they tore down one of her fruit trees. So she said, we knew time was of the essence, so decided to try and tie it together and use some orange plastic caution tape that is sort of a little stretchy, and then wrapped it with plastic, then aluminum foil, then taped electric tape around it, and had been using bamboo stakes to get it all together. She basically wondered, she talked about the contact, and you'll see this in the notes later. She wondered if it would be better to just take it all apart, undo it, and cut it and graft it, or get rooting hormone, or try rooting the top since the rootstock is still attached? What would you suggest? Seriously damaged tree.
I'd have to see. I think if it was my tree and I was really wanting to save it, I would probably do everything. I would take the part that was like off and I would do something with that. And I would take the part that was attached to the rootstock and I would try to get that, well, for starters, the rootstock itself can regrow probably. If it's a grafted tree, what kind of tree was it?
Let me see if I can go back in the note and find it. It was really long and it didn't copy. It was a 3-foot tall Granny Smith dwarf tree that they planted in March. And it says it broke the tree off pretty much at ground level. The graft held and there was 3 to 4 inches of rootstock still attached to the scion.
Okay, so she's got no roots on the stalk that's attached to the scion. I mean, the graft and the top and the rootstock has no roots.
No, she says that the graft held and there was 3 to 4 inches of rootstock still attached to the scion. At the
she said there was rootstock attached to the scion. Yes. She did not say there were roots on it.
Well, she did later.
Okay.
Not on the scion, but on the rootstock.
Well, if the top scion part is separated from the roots, the rootstock will come back with root suckers that she can graft something onto. Now, if she can keep that, you say it was a dwarf, a super dwarf Granny Smith, or she
just said a 3-foot tall Granny Smith dwarf apple.
Okay. Regarding dwarfs, as far as I know, there are no genetic apple dwarfs. It's all the dwarfing is done by the rootstock. So the rootstock would be dwarfing, but the Granny Smith would be just Granny Smith, no matter what it's attached to. So if she can keep those roots alive and the top alive, she's still got her tree. If it's separated from the rootstock that she had planted in the ground, that rootstock will come back as rootstock of whatever kind it is, but it will not be Granny Smith.
Right.
Did that answer the question? I can't tell.
And there's, unless she says yes or no, I'll let her ponder and I'll keep on going for a minute. She also asked, and I wondered this as well, the beautiful plum tree that you had with all the different colors. Do you think that was grafted for looks? Or
Yes.
do you think that was for looks?
Yes. Yes. He was an artist and he did it specifically to get those colored blooms to do that.
Okay.
And they may have all been ornamental plums.
And that's kind of what I was thinking too. Phyllis wanted to know, do you buy the different kinds of grafts from a tree nursery? And then Cheryl asked right behind it, are there any good, any sites that are good for being able to get uncommon scions and rootstock? Because you had mentioned trading online.
There are a lot of sites and a lot of individuals. And there are some trading groups, North American Scion Exchange. And California has a huge graft or Scion Exchange trading community. They trade all kinds of different varieties and so on, different species.
And I
All of it.
would imagine once you get hooked up with one, you just start asking and everybody shares
Right.
some information.
And there are people that sell them, and they sell them on their own websites or online or whatever. Or I think that the North American Scion Exchange allows people to sell as well as trade. And I will say that trading these scion material is, I've done it. It's a fairly big deal. I mean, you have to go out and cut this stuff, and you got to label it all properly and ship it all properly, and etc.
Yeah, it sounds like they're very delicate. I mean, because you want to keep them moist and everything. So Mike and Lois wanted to know, have you noticed degradation of tree health when grafting an early apple, such as a yellow transparent, to a late apple like a Wolf River?
So the rootstock is whatever the rootstock is, but Wolf River is the inner stem, correct?
All they said was, yes, that would be the inner stem, and then you would be grafting the yellow transparent, which is early to it.
I'm not aware of any problem from doing that.
Well, looking at the chart, it would imply that there wasn't, that you could do something like that. So that's all of our questions. Lots of information. Want to thank you again. Just so everybody knows, we do have a presentation at the end of July coming up. It's going to be on landscaping with native plants. And as you might imagine, those of you who can guess, Leslie Allward is going to be doing that. She's always a delight. She's a great presenter. So I want you to be watching for that link. My apologies to anyone who might have gotten a bad link tonight. We had some problems there, so we'll try to do better next time. And just want to thank you all. Let's see. Okay, if you could hang with me, Kathleen, for a minute, and Cheryl, hang with me for a minute after we're done here. I want to let everybody get going. Have a wonderful 4th of July, and we will see you all at the end of July for our next presentation, July 28th, Wednesday evening, 6:30. Thanks.